Today we're joined by Venerable Chandaratana Panyadure, and so good to have you, Venerable.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Hi.
I wanted to begin by just reading your introduction for all those present. Venerable Panyadure Chandaratana Thero ordained as a Buddhist monk at Na Uyana Forest Monastery in 2008 under the guidance of the Most Venerable Na Uyane Aryadhamika Mahathero. Over the next 6 years, he engaged in rigorous training in both samatha and vipassana meditation under revered teachers, including Most Venerable Aryananda Mahathero and Venerable Sri Jnanasiri Thero. He spent several years teaching and practicing abroad before returning to Sri Lanka and taking up residence at Nisarnavanaya Forest Monastery in 2015, where he has been practicing under the Most Venerable U Dhammajiva Mahathero, and serving as the deputy abbot since 2017. Combining a background in information technology with decades of deep practice, he inspires meditators around the world through his rare fusion of contemplative depth, modern knowledge, and compassionate service. He's also written the book Signless in Emptiness, a commentary on the Satipatthana Sutta, and one on the Upadana Sutta. Bhante, forgive me for all the mispronunciations there. It is so great to have you on. And you visited us for Alms Round last month, I believe, which was a real pleasure, and just getting some time with you.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you again. So as you mentioned, that it was a really nice time I spent with you at Seattle, and it was a really nice encountering of you, of your colleagues, and that some are interested. And then we had a Steve with Steve. That we had another evening session. That's a very good participation, and real nice they are happening in Seattle. It's interesting to be there. We'll see you again.
We're hoping you get to come by on your next visit through, but we appreciate you joining even from across the Pacific. And one thing, when we initially invited you for this date, I thought it was very beautiful. Your first response was that this was the birthday, December 11th, which is the date currently for you in Sri Lanka, was the birthday of Venerable Matara Sri Jnanarama Mahathero, who I believe was your teacher's teacher and the founder and first abbot of the monastery where you currently are deputy abbot as well. And you asked to speak about him. And I thought that request from you at the beginning of the interview was just so beautiful and respectful that I wanted to have that be our first question. So would you speak about this teacher and what he meant to you, and kind of what teachings of his have continued to resonate, what his legacy has been?
Yeah, actually, that in Sri Lanka, due to various reasons, the Buddhist practice was somewhat discouraged, and monks were only practicing at the temples, and there was no in-depth practice into meditation. So Most Venerable Matara Sri Jnanarama Thero combined with Most Venerable Kadavaddhuwe Jinavansa Thero, so they decided to start a forest tradition again. That was in 1951. So they were actually the prominent teachers at the what we call as the Pirivenas. Those are the teaching monasteries or teaching institutes for the monks. But they were only doing only to the Pariyatti side, only to the learning side. But now they want to particularly emphasize the Patipatti side. So the meditative, say, understanding side. So that's why they started a group of monasteries, forest monasteries, in 1951, June 18. And then Mitirigala Nisarnavanaya was started in 1967. And the first abbot and the chief preceptor was Most Venerable Matara Sri Jnanarama Thero. And so his presence was quite known to many people, and many even foreign monks were attracted. And there was a good legacy he started, and he published several books. So he is good in Sanskrit, Sinhalese, and Pali. He's an expert in that area, and so he has published several books, even in Sanskrit, Pali, and Sinhalese. And so certain books actually even translated to English, like the 7 stages of purification, then 7 contemplations of insight. So those 2 books were translated into English also available, and those were translated by the BPS, that Buddhist Publication Society. So they translated that. And so actually the most inspiring book I read about him is called the Ama Bindu, then drops of nectar, if we translate it to English, the Ama Bindu. While I was in Nauyana, I was also searching to whom to take as a role model, and I read many books about various monks, and this book, which is written by many authors, many have contributed after the passing away of Ñāṇārāma Thero, and so they are talking about him in a very diligent, kind of an eminent way. But interesting thing is, Ñāṇārāma Thero also has contributed his own autobiography there, but he was talking about his mistakes and flaws and various areas that he could have done well. So it's a very honest way of inner reflection. It really inspired me how he is actually handled Nisarnavane, and how what he want to do by starting this forest tradition in Sri Lanka. And now it has developed to around 200 forest monasteries throughout the country, and certain monasteries like Nisarnavane, Nauyana, Galduwa. So likewise, there are many very established, very well known forest monasteries already available. And so the little thing that they have started by spending more time into meditation and emphasizing the patipatti side, the more principle-wise re-establishment of the forest tradition. So that was one of the, in a way, kind of resurgence of the country's Buddhist activities, because after various kind of issues the country has gone through, that that Sri Lanka was almost 100 years under the colonial situation. So as a result of that, the Buddhist values and the practice was really affected. But this starting of the forest tradition, what we call as the Sri Kalyani Yogashrama Sanstha in 1951, helped back to establish a very practicing Buddhist again. So now Buddhist meditation is very popular in Sri Lanka, and in Nisarnavane we conduct almost every throughout the year we conduct retreats, and that's a very good participation. Actually, we can occupy around 90 people at a time, and we have a separate retreat center at Nisarnavane. So there's a very good participation, and now a fair amount of Sri Lankans are into the spiritual side, and they are talking about meditation, samatha meditation, vipassana meditation. So that is something that I can see that how that what Matarashi Ñāṇārāma Thero and Kadavaddwe Jinavansa Thero have started has now spread out, and many people have become practicing Buddhist.
Yeah, as I admitted before we went live, my own knowledge of Buddhism in Sri Lanka is just so limited. And I think for the most part, most Buddhists, maybe even most Buddhists around the world, our knowledge is very parochial. That means, we know our own type of Buddhism or our own subset of a subset, but we don't know much else. So I find it really interesting that to the extent that I know about Buddhism in Sri Lanka, I know about Nauyana Forest Monastery, where I actually went and stayed for 2 nights with a group of Pa'ak monks from Thailand. And then also Mitrigala Nisarana Vaniya. And I think why I know those is because meditation monks and forest monks in our tradition who've gone to Sri Lanka because they wanted to explore the Vinaya keeping forest tradition, meditation traditions, have really foregrounded those 2 monasteries as being places to visit. So I hope to be able to talk about and hear more about both of those monasteries. And specifically, while we're on the topic of Mitrigala that Sri Matara Ñāṇārāma started, one of its mottos, which I find really impressive, and I know Bhikkhu Bodhi visited there and actually maybe even meditated with Matara Ñāṇārāma, but their motto is Nibbana in this life. Nibbana in this life. And it says that the whole of practice is for Magga Phala and Nibbana, the paths and fruits and Nibbana. And that is that's a very bold motto to have. It's actually on your website, on the Mitrigala website. And
So I'm curious if you could talk about how you frame that. You're the deputy abbot at Mitragala, Nisarnavaniya, and how is that framed for the monastics who live there and for the meditators that come and practice there?
Yeah, so it's both actually. The thing is that as I said, once the Buddhist practice was somewhat subjected to certain kind of an influence coming from these various incidents happened in Sri Lanka before the starting of this forest tradition. So the Nibbana was out of their scope. So nobody thought that this practice is possible. Still, the Gautama Buddha's dispensation is available. So that has gone out of the scope, and they were thinking, okay, now we have to wait till the Metteyya Buddha to appear, and now these attainments are not available, not even jhana is available, and no point of practicing nowadays, and people going to meditate can become crazy. So these kind of weird ideas were there in Sri Lanka. So after the starting of Mithriya Nisarnavanaya, and actually Jnanarama Thero even has gone to a level of finding the original, that old sources. So he has published a book called Vipassana Parapura, Generations of Vipassana, the insight meditation. So there he tried to uncover various traditions available in Sri Lanka, particularly various schools talking different aspects of Vipassana. So he combined things together and published this Vipassana Parapura. And then even about the Nibbana, there are various misconceptions, and thinking that Nibbana is that a kind of eternal state, eternal place, or something like that. So then he invited Most Venerable Katukurunde Jnanananda Thero to start a series of Dhamma sermons, particularly explaining about Nibbana. So it's happened in Nisarnavanaya, and it consisted of 33 sermons, and later it was translated into English by himself, by Most Venerable Katukurunde Jnanananda Thero. So Nivane Nivima, in Sinhala we call Nivane Nivima. So the Nibbana, the mind stilled. So those are available freely in the Katukurunde Thero's website called the seenthroughthenet.net. So the Nibbana, the mind stilled, is a very, very, very inspiring series of sermons. Particularly, Jnanananda Thero wants to explain about the concepts around the Nibbana, and using particularly the early Buddhist teachings, and sometimes arguing about the certain commentarial explanations and how correct they are, and he's giving his own explanations according to the early Buddhist teachings, how another better interpretation is available about Nibbana or any other concept. And it's a very, very inspiring series of sermons. And at Nisarnavanaya, we often take his books, Katukurunde Jnanananda Thero's books, like Concept and Reality, Nibbana, Nibbana, the Mind Stilled, and then The Magic of the Mind. So these are the very interesting books compiled by Jnanananda Thero. So the other thing is Jnanarama Thero himself was encouraging Venerable Jnanananda to conduct these series of sermons, and he himself was listening to those sermons and encouraging him, because immediately Jnanananda Thero didn't accept the invitation, because it can become a kind of a controversial thing. So if the old certain teachings are tried to prove in a different way, but when Jnanarama really encouraged him to don't worry, just mention my name, so I am the one inviting you to conduct. So likewise, he really encouraged him to conduct, and then it has become really popular. And I found that that Bhikkhu Analeo has conducted this Nibbana, the Mind Stilled, at a recent time as a free course at the Numata Center. And so likewise, you can see that it's a very known series of Dhamma sermons. So this is how so the Nibbana has become something that we have to aspire. It is not something not accessible. So it is, these teachings are still available. The Buddha's teaching is still live. So it's kind of an encouragement for us to practice, because otherwise, if we don't have any idea, or if we are going ahead with a very vague situation, then people are not inspired to practice the Buddha's teaching. But the Jnanarama Theros and Jnanananda Theros, this intervention really inspired the people to practice. Okay, it's still available. I mean, you guys have to practice. You have to put forth some effort, and then these things are possible. So likewise, a big encouragement has happened because of this Jnanarama Thero and Jnanananda Thero, this combination. So I think therefore this motto at Nisarnavanaya, that Nibbana in this very life, is something therefore for the monks and as well as to the practitioners, kind of an encouraging way of practice, just to practice, not just to go ahead with the learning and only for the academic stuff, but giving some emphasis for the practice.
It's interesting. I'm struck by the parallels between Jnana Rama Thero and Longpo Cha, Ajahn Chah in our tradition, who,
Right.
These sort of towering figures that revitalized a huge portion of the practice tradition. And just as a lot of people in the U.S. encounter Longpo Cha's ripples through, disciples like Jack Kornfield, or, not even realizing they're being affected by his teachings, some people may not realize that, Jnana Rama Thero, encouraging Jnanananda to write Nibbana the Mind Stilled, which deeply influenced Bhante Análio, and he's had a profound effect. I believe Jnanananda was the first one to translate Papancha's Proliferation as well. And just seeing these ripples spread out, it's a pleasure to get to kind of trace it back to the source or one of the sources on his birthday as well. And just to kind of bring it down to something very practical, with conceiving of Nibbana as being possible in this very life, you worked as a software engineer, you were immersed in the world and all those currents of Papancha, of proliferation, which, insidiously have made their way into most of our psyches. Many modern people just have a lot of trouble with that whole samadhi part of the, training, bringing the mind to calm so that they can see with insight. What have you found is effective teaching people in terms of just calming their mind down to deep samadhi? Like, how do you instruct people? Do you use noting practice like the Mahasi method? Do you lean into loving kindness? Or do you teach anapanasati a bit? Could you give us kind of a rundown or a tool belt of the most effective meditation means you found for bringing people's minds to calm in this day and age?
Yeah, very interesting. So the thing is, one thing, as you mentioned, because nowadays people are more into thinking and proliferation and overthinking, obsessive thinking, all sort of things are there. And nowadays, the modern tools, the techniques, technology also has a great influence on people to get distracted and think too much again. So people are coming from various, that's kind of a behavior, and so it's very difficult to give one set of meditation instruction. Okay, you all do this, something like that. So, but certain mindfulness practices are quite commonly used, like say, for example, mindful walking. So at Nisarnane, we really emphasize mindful walking. So it's a very interesting practice, and you can, if you find Nisarnane, so there are many walking paths available at many places, and closer to the meditation hall and to each our kutis, we have a separate walking path. So likewise, we encourage mindful walking seriously. And so the interesting thing is, so through mindful walking, the people can really calm down their thinking. So again and again, the high emphasis is onto the Kayanupassana. Okay, you come to the body, develop body awareness, again and again, pay attention to the touch sensation. And as you said, we sometimes use the noting. So if your right foot is touching, okay, you can note it as right. Left foot is touching, you can note it as left. Or else you can note it as lifting, moving, placing, so like that. So these kind of very little noting techniques really help them to calm down their thinking and pay further attention to the body sensation. And then sometimes we ask them to practice anapanasati if they are convenient, or else then we ask them to practice rising and falling of the abdomen. Because these two techniques are actually at Nisarnavanya, many techniques are being used. We can't say we are only targeting just one technique, but we are encouraging them to use various techniques, because in Sri Lanka, you know that the for guardian meditations, Buddha Anusati, Metta, Asubha, and Marana Anusati. Those are quite known to people, and as a preparatory practice, they do a little bit of maybe Buddha Anusati or Metta, but then we encourage into Satipatthana. Particularly, say Kayanupassana, this encouraging them to establish mindfulness on the body and maybe with Anapanasati. And once they are established in any form, then as a result of the development of the mindfulness, Samadhi become a available or accessible part. So, for example, at the beginning, it appear like difficult to pay attention, but slowly, as they train the mind, then they find, okay, now I can pay attention to 5 steps, 10 steps, 20 steps. Maybe throughout the round, I can pay attention through the walking. Or if they are practicing Anapanasati, okay, now I can continuously watch 20 breaths, say 50 breaths, 100 breaths. So that means slowly the Samadhi factor also is emerging as a result of the development of the mindfulness. So therefore, rather than we motivate them to target Samadhi, we encourage them to practice mindfulness. So as a result of the mindful practice of mindfulness, slowly they start feeling the Samadhi as well. So once Samadhi is available, fair amount of concentration is available, and then we can look into the Vipassana aspects.
Bhante, I'm curious if you could say more about the practice at the monastery that you ordained at Wat Nauyana. So when I went there, it had already kind of become a Pa'ak, almost branch monastery. So Pa'ak Sayadaw being a Burmese meditation master who teaches kind of a different approach than the one you just laid out. So he very much, at least traditionally, doesn't emphasize walking meditation. So the meditation center that I stayed at just had an air-conditioned Dhamma hall, but really I was even kind of chastised for doing some walking meditation once. And so after that, I just did it elsewhere. But yeah, and it's very regulated. Like you're on a path of just paying attention to the breath at the tip of the nose, and it doesn't go into those 4 guardian meditations right off the bat. And also just, so the practice at Nauyana, that's how I experienced it to the extent that I did. And also the geography of Nauyana. There's a Seattle laywoman who's currently going there to practice for an extended period of time. And when I visited, there were 3 different kind of layers to the monastery, like a public-facing lower level, and then like a very forested other level, and then even further off, it was maybe even more remote. Could you talk about your experience there, both with the meditation method and with the geography of the monastery, if it was different then or if it's similar to what I'm putting forth now?
So I spent around 6 years at Nauyana, and as you said, practice Pa'ak method throughout this 6 years. And as you said, it's a samatha-oriented vipassana practice. So the method is taken from the Visuddhimagga and somewhat related with the Abhidhamma. And so they asked the practitioners to go through some severe, say, practice on the jhana, and say go with the what we call kasina and anapanasati, and many different techniques are taught to attain jhana, and then asked to practice vipassana meditation as per explained by Pa'ak Sayadaw. So Pa'ak Sayadaw has somewhat formulated various techniques available in Visuddhimagga, and so that is how a different kind of a technique is available for the practitioners as a result of the formulation of this Pa'ak Sayadaw's method. And the thing is, for me, I felt okay, a more open kind of a practice, and say, as you said, the walking meditation was quite helpful. While I was at Nauyana, actually I was practicing while I was practicing Pa'ak method, I still used walking meditation. Many others also are using, but I don't know the current situation. But we were using walking meditation even at Nauyana. But after coming to Nisarnavanaya and then went through a meditation retreat with Sayadaw Pandita, I found giving emphasis to Satipatthana becomes a very important, say, coming back to my practice. Because sometimes when we are accommodating so many different types of practices, we might lose our base. I feel that Satipatthana is the kind of a base that Buddha has taught us, and even he mentioned it as the heritage of the Buddha, right? The heritage of the Buddha he encouraged as the Satipatthana. Okay, monks, you shouldn't leave the heritage of the Buddha, heritage of the father. So the Piya Urume, what in Sinhala we call the heritage of the Buddha, inheritance of the Buddha. So that is the Satipatthana. So when someone is practicing Satipatthana, the interesting thing I found is that his proliferation become less and less. So he become more and more aware of what is going on. And once the mindfulness is coupled with the clear comprehension, sati and sampajanya, then kind of an auto correction starts. Kind of the mind starts looking at us. Kind of a monitoring process is going on, and that monitoring process actually start correcting us. So Buddha emphasized that sati dovariko bhikkave ariya savako akusalam pajahati kusalam bhaveti savajjam pajahati anavajjam bhaveti suddham attanam pariharati. So Buddha emphasized, so when one is practicing satipatthana, the interesting thing is, so naturally you start abandoning the unwholesome activities, unwholesome qualities in you, and you only try to accommodate the wholesome qualities. And whatever erroneous fault kind of mistakes that you try to abandon, and only the correct and the more useful practices you start to get the benefit. And then as a result of that, more and more your mind become purified, your behavior become more purified. So that is the theme of the Satipatthana. So Buddha explains Satipatthana for a person to purify oneself, to purify their mind. So that is something that people start recognizing. It is not that you are believing, rather you, as a result of the practice, you start recognizing it is happening with me. So my mind was like this. Okay, as a result of this practice, okay, my mind is like this now. So as a result of this, so you start recognizing even various emotions, various mind states, various defilements happening in the mind. So slowly, it's a purification process is emerging in you. So you start purifying the mind. So I therefore like to emphasize the Satipatthana practice as our theme of the practice. You are free to take the advantage of various other little meditation techniques, but keeping mindfulness practice, Satipatthana practice, Kanupassana, Vedananupassana, Chittanupassana, Dhammanupassana as the basis, I feel it's giving us a very good foundation, and not only a foundation, but it is taking you to understand the defilements, various traits in you, and how to abandon those traits, and more keeping the mind into the silence. When it is necessary, you can think, but still how to achieve kind of a very simple awareness, ongoing mindfulness, kind of inner silence. So these are the areas that I found quite interesting in the practice. So that's why I have changed from now to Nisarnavanaya. So, and again, I was quite inspired by Jnanarama Thero's the example, as well as from the Katakulunda Jnananda Thero's teachings. I was quite inspired.
Yeah, that's great general advice. And I'm curious, in general, if you could speak a little bit about the geography of Nauyana, just because we're going to be creating a monastery on the ground. And a couple questions around that is the Seattle laywoman who's going to stay there for an extended period, is that normal? Like, can lay people just go and stay there kind of at that lower level of the mountain or of the property? Or did she get some kind of special dispensation?
Actually, now, as far as I know, during those times, so the lower monastery, as you said, they cater the different, say, needs of the lay people as well, and they do the sermons and all other activities are going on. The middle mountain is particularly for the practice, and there's a separate meditation hall, and monks are on a silent retreat most of the time. and they only come to the lower monastery to participate to the Uposatha. And then, as you said, there's a far monastery in the Matale side where monks are more into their own practice, and it's kind of an isolation. And so that, like that, kind of 3 layers are there. So I have spent in all these 3 layers. So actually, I have got a lot of benefit from all these 3 areas, because I was at the middle mountain for 1.5 years, and then in isolation another some time, and then again come back to the lower monastery to start teaching and certain activities. And yes, they are actually even nowadays they even further expanded. Now they have a separate monastery for teaching, what we call the Nauyana Dharmayatana, a completely separate monastery established that happened recently. And there's a separate nunnery also available apart from the Nauyana monastery. So it's a huge organization it has become. Nisarnavane, on the other hand, so we are in a very strict forest reservation, so we are not allowed to expand. So Nisarnavane is under the Forest Department of Sri Lanka. It's a government department, so we are not allowed to expand. So we only allowed to do our activities within 28 acres. So we are in a way a little bit limited in that sense. So as a result of that, what we do is we are finding various other branch monasteries. And even now I am spending my time in Aswattha branch monastery. That's a new monastery added to Nisarnavane. And likewise, separate few branch monasteries are established to Nisarnavane. And lay people are coming to Nisarnavane to practice, and there are residential facilities available, and many foreigners are also coming, and there are residential facilities available. And instructions are also given, and they can come and meet the monks and ask kind of questions related to meditation. So very good kind of a relationship is available at Nisarnavane also.
Yana, sounds like a meditation layer cake. Sounds quite good in the different levels. And hearing, hope that was respectful to say. It sounds great.
Yeah, it was delicious.
Thank you. Bhante, speaking about, so you pointing out the Satipatthana, the foundations of mindfulness, as a key foundation makes a lot of sense. Especially, the noting practice of Mahasi, knowing is such a helpful support for that. And just the fact that this knowing quality, watching and self-correcting, as you said, all 4 Satipatthana makes so much sense in really purifying that quality that knows experience in those 4 domains. One thing I find for many modern practitioners is they know they should be doing that, and they have all the willpower in the world, but there's just the samadhi and the pleasure don't come. And so you, as you mentioned, at Nauyana spent a long time on deep retreat, and you had to be getting some pleasure during that time. And so I'm curious, what skillful means would you advise people who, maybe they've tried counting their breath and it just feels like counting breath, and that's as far as it goes and it feels dry, or they've tried, doing noting practice and just find it becomes an act of will. There's no juiciness to their practice. How do you advise someone in that situation? Where does the joy in practice come from? What roots to joy can you give us? Or piti and sukha, all that.
Yeah, the thing is, I think this is a kind of an initial problem that we have. So because the practice itself actually will generate piti sukha as you go on, but immediately it might not be available. So as you said, when you start Satipatthana practice, it may appear like very dry, because again and again you are paying attention and you are asked to establish mindfulness, and there is no much joy arising. But with time it happens. Now the breath can become a beautiful breath, and it can become a way of giving you some joy. And so therefore and at Nisarnavane, we are not sort of asking them to go for jhana, by the way. But before that, we ask them to get into vipassana. And so I don't think that spending it's a kind of a controversial thing. So if one has the capacity, they can spend some time in jhana and get some inspiration from that, and that's okay. But in Sananya, we do more into vipassana because we have very limited time. So if we are spending fair amount of time and we are sort of expecting happiness only through the samatha practice, only through various other means, then how to get the happiness of the inner calmness, the say purity of the mind, say the touching of the Buddha, some deep teachings. So that is also giving us a lot of happiness. Now, say for example, when you are in certain amount of silence and reading a book and listening to a certain Dhamma sermon, and which also encourages very purified mind, very calm, relaxed, quiet mind, it also giving you a lot of inspiration. Now, say, for example, when you are reading Nibbana, the Mind Still, say the Magic of the Mind, so any other book, whatever, talking about the meditation, but if you are really able to touch it, if you're really able to experience it, and you feel, okay, inspired, okay, my goodness, I am also there, I can really touch it, I can really experience it. So likewise, I feel the Dhamma Piti also is something that the gain that you are getting through the association of the Dhamma, reading the Dhamma, listening to Dhamma, also gives us a lot of inspiration. And also it confirms that the path that you are taken is correct. Other than that, I sometimes ask them to practice Buddhanusati and say metta if they are willing to. And if they find it's difficult for them to immediately come to Satipatthana, okay, you can practice this metta or Buddhanusati or any other technique that they are familiar with to give some practice. Actually, that is emphasized by the Buddha in Bhikkhunupassaya Sutta, Panidahaya Bhavana and Apanidahaya Bhavana. So there Buddha emphasized, in case if you find the Satipatthana practice appear like little dry, okay, you are free to switch to a little bit of your familiar, your most interested type of meditation, maybe samatha meditation. Spend some time there, again motivate the mind, again derive some joy, happiness, and again switch back to the Satipatthana. So Buddha also has encouraged. So therefore, I feel this kind of combination can help the people, the practitioners, to develop certain amount of joy. And later, I feel that inner happiness, inner joy may be accessible to them without going for typical mundane kind of happiness.
Bhante, in your book, Signless and Emptiness, you point to something similar. You talk about 5 different supports, which I think are found in the Majjhima Nikaya as being 5 supports for right view. And those are morality, having heard the teachings or listening to Dhamma, samatha, vipassana, and the third one is sakachanugahita. So discussion. Yeah. And I'm curious about this factor of the support of discussion and how what does that look like in Mitrigala? Is this in between retreats? Are retreats noble silence, and then there's noble discussion, or this supportive discussion in between retreats? Or are the retreats not noble silence, or are the monks? So how does this work? This balance between noble silence and discussion?
So actually, in our retreats are kind of formulated in a way. So the participants have to write a report about their retreat, their practice, and what they experience and what are their difficulties, any obstacles. So they are writing a short report about their own experience, and then someone is presenting it in general. So we don't, if really necessary, the particular practitioner come and meet the teacher. But in general, what we do is we do an open discussion, in the sense that these reports are being presented to the audience, and then the monk, whoever the teacher, giving some advice based on that whatever the report submitted. So if he has explained his experiences, okay, then the monk can understand, okay, what is the status, whether you are able to look at the meditative object, the primary object properly, and you are able to maintain that consistently. And so likewise, that open discussion in one sense help us to say get the advice from the monk. That is one thing. The other thing is there may be others who have the same question. Sometimes we are going through the same kind of a area of our practice, but we are unable to express it properly. But another person has really beautifully, very directly, openly has expressed that. Then the other person who is unable to express it get the benefit. Okay, monk, the teacher has taken that report and he's explaining what to do next and what is your say weakness or what is your strength. So likewise, there's a kind of a discussion going on, and that is also connected with certain suttas, and it's not just kind of arbitrary type of explanation, but taken certain suttas and giving the explanation. So the participants get the encouragement. Okay, these people are practicing. So these experiences are not our own imaginary status, but rather they have practiced and then they have presented it, and this is what the outcome. So likewise, this open discussion is what we encourage at Nisarana. So in one sense, you get the answer to your problem. The other sense that you get an inspiration by the other practitioners. Okay, not only me, they also have these kind of issues. Not only me, they also have come to the good level, or they also have touched certain aspects of the Dhamma. So likewise, this is what we encourage during the discussion time, and what we call as a Q&A session. Every retreat we have Q&A session every day actually.
Okay. Yeah, and that's very interesting. And are those written reports? Is that every day, or is that once or twice during a retreat, or?
Every day it is available. Now, if it is a 5-day retreat, there are 5 Q&A sessions. It's actually just after the lunch break. So we have that Q&A session. So someone is presenting it, the teacher is answering the questions, and if I am handling, I sometimes ask the participants to come forward, and if they have any further needs further clarification, they can ask. And if I have a certain doubt and I want to get some further idea of what was his history about his practice, then I ask that person to come forward and explain about little bit about further his history about his practice. So it's a kind of a open discussion.
We appreciate you taking Dhammasakhacha time with us as well today. And we'll move over to the YouTube comments in a second, but did want to ask, whenever you sort of recite Pali just so beautifully, I feel like I can see Ajahn Kovilos get goosebumps. He really loves Pali.
I'm loving it.
And so as someone who's immersed yourself in that language, and so much of Sinhala is interwoven with Pali or coming from Pali, just what do you feel is the use of learning that language particularly? And do you have a favorite few Pali phrases or like hidden, phrases you find in the suttas that you feel are very dharmically infused, that you wish more people knew these Pali phrases?
Yeah, actually Pali language was a really beautiful language, and I haven't done a in-depth learning of Pali, but I did what is necessary for the time being. And because of my interest, sometimes these verses and certain passages or certain sentences, naturally I can memorize them. It is not that I am doing some hard work to memorize it, but naturally, since I like it really, and really kind of that Buddha is talking to me, so naturally I was able to remember them. And so I am using them during the Dhamma sermons also. And typically Dhamma sermons are connected with certain suttas. So if you consider our retreat, it is designed like it is. We are based on a particular sutta, taken it as a theme of the retreat, and taking from different other suttas as well to support what I am trying to present. And then certain Pali phrases are being used during that sermon. So then people will understand, okay, it is not my own creation. Because the thing is, we as monks, we don't need to deviate the Buddha's teaching or give a wrong interpretation, but I'm trying to give the the direct teaching of the Buddha taken from the Pali canon, even telling that Pali phrase and then giving the explanation maybe in Sinhala or in English. So then people, if they have doubt, they can go to the source and look at it. So if in case they thought, okay, I have given a wrong interpretation, now free apps are available, internet is available, books are available, they can easily go and refer the sutta, and then they can get their own explanation. They can read further. So therefore, giving Pali phrases during the Dhamma sermons, Dhamma teachings is a quite common practice in Sri Lanka, at least in Nisarnavanaya. So at least I am doing it because I really like to emphasize the Buddha's teaching and give the credit to him. And it is not my invention. Buddha has taught like this. Okay, this is the Pali phrase. So I am trying to explain it, and this is what I understood. So therefore, certain Pali phrases, as you said, known to me, many Pali phrases, not just one. Many Pali phrases are very interesting. Now, I just to share with you now, since you touched the topic of proliferation. So there's a very beautiful sutta called Baddhaka Sutta, where Venerable Sariputta is highlighting how one can have a peaceful death. So there he has added very beautiful 2 verses at the end of the sutta. Yochapa panchang hitwana nippa pancha pade rato aradayiso nibbanang yogakhemang anuttara. The one who is able to abandon the conceptual proliferation, Yochapa panchang hitwana nippa pancha pade rato, and he is more inclined towards the nippa pancha, who is more inclined towards the calmness, the stillness of the mind. And he is actually inviting the Nibbana. He is very much like attaining the Nibbana, which is the complete freedom from all different kinds of bondages. So likewise, the Pali phrases are very beautiful as well as very concise and giving us a very beautiful Dhamma that Buddha has taught.
Bhante, I forget which book of yours it is, but you talk about how language is a sanya, language is perception on one level. And you talk about how, of course, perception is not self. And I'm curious, there is this relationship between language, perception, and proliferation. And for myself, I can speak Thai and can read Pali well enough. And I think I proliferate differently in different languages. I mean, certainly Thai is my, you could call it a second language. It's nowhere near as good as your English, but I'm curious if you proliferate differently in English versus Sinhala. Pali is just so good at like cutting off proliferation that it's harder to proliferate in Pali. But yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, actually, Buddha mentioned in Nibbedika Sutta that when sanya is taken to a kind of a level, so the sanya ultimately manifests as a way of communication. So once you recognize something, you want to tell it to another person. You need to communicate your experience to another person. So as a result of that, in Nibbedika Sutta, Buddha mentioned, okay, the one outcome of sanya, the recognition, these different kinds of signs, perceptions, is that how we are trying to communicate, how we are trying to express what you have experienced. So in order to express, we need words, we need sentences, we need grammar, we need languages. So then only we can properly express what we have experienced. So that is how we are actually getting to these different languages. But the problem is, we know that what we recognize, what we experience could be distorted. That sanya vipalasa playing a kind of a role. So even though we are experiencing something, it might not be the reality that we are experiencing. Our experience might be a distorted experience. My judgments, my different kinds of preconceived ideas, my upbringing, all that has a great influence to my experience. So after I experience that kind of a distorted scenario, that is what I am trying to express. Then my expression also may be distorted. So that's why very calm, very quiet, very silent kind of experience is, we can say, at least to some extent, closer to the reality than a more thinking related, judgment related, say argument related experience, assume that you are able to calm down your mind, relax your mind, pay attention only to the phenomena, and you are not making any judgment, you're not adding your own likes and dislikes, then you can say, okay, I'm just going through a mere experience, a pure experience kind of a thing. Ditte ditta matta, sute sutta matta, mute muta matta, vinyate vinyata matta. Yeah, just see, and you're not adding your own stuff. You're not distorting your experience.
I loved you're referencing the Nibbedika Sutta. I think it has one of my favorite teachings. That's a person's resolves on sensuality is called sensuality. The beautiful things remain as they are in the world, and the wise are unmoved. I just love that sutta. Bhante, we have a question from the chat, sort of unrelated, but fascinating. Someone wants to know what the Buddha's advice was to lay people who had to deal with politics, or how people should deal with politics. Just to give you a softball.
So entirely different question. I mean, they need a kind of a political system for better governance. I mean, it's their freedom to find the correct people and to vote to the correct people, and then have the correct policies as their governing factor, and then they can be benefited from that proper politics. So when politicians are with some wrong motives, some ulterior motives, and that is where things go wrong. But the politics as per se, I don't think there's an issue, but it is for the betterment of the society and to treat, to service the people, and then it's in the good hand. If things are coming to a good people and they are doing it honestly, then definitely it's something for the betterment of the society.
What would you say to some, people, many in the modern era, who aren't directly involved in, being in the political system, but are just watching a political situation that they find very disturbing, a lot of anger, fear? How do you advise a practitioner to interact with that whole realm to keep their heart centered and bright?
So one thing I feel is things can change. So we don't need to think, okay, so every time this is like this, so we are so unfortunate, and this is something not going to change. So that's kind of a depressive way of looking at it. But we can look at it more positive way, and next time you can vote for a better person. So since you are a lay person, so this question is asking, so you have an opportunity to vote for a good person, and it's your responsibility to find out an honest person, a capable person who has a real interest to serve the country or serve the nation or whatever, and then you can vote for that person rather than keep on complaining, because our nature in the mind is to complain. Okay, we are not never happy about the things, ongoing thing, but we always find fault and something to be unhappy. So every time things are in relative terms, okay, your country may be doing well, your current government may be doing well, but our tendency is to find fault. So that's a kind of inner trait we humans have. So are we really under the influence of that inner trait, or really there's a vast majority has found this is an issue of the current government? Then they can vote for a better government or new system. That because majority of the people have understood, okay, these people are doing wrong and this is not correct and we better change it, then we can go for a different system.
Bhante, there's a phrase which is called non-overlapping magisteria, and it refers to some people's ideas about science and religion, that science and religion are each their own domain and that they don't overlap. And I'm curious about the realm of overlap or non-overlap between politics and Buddhism, specifically monastic Buddhism. So in Thailand, monks can't even vote, much less, be on the Supreme Court or serve in parliament or anything. Whereas, as I understand it, at least at some point, there are monks who are in parliament or something in Sri Lanka. And those are two very different views of the relationship between the Sangha or a bhikkhu and politics. Could you just maybe talk about what it is in Sri Lanka, and if you're able to share your view about how well or poorly that works? Yeah, that would be interesting.
So, yeah. Now, let me quote Matara Ñāṇārāma here. So he basically has given a very specific monastic conduct to us. He is asking, okay, monks, you should never go even to the court system. You should never file even a court case, and whatever internal conflicts you have to sort it out within yourself. Don't ever go to the the typical judiciary system. So then you are into more mundane way of handling things. So therefore, Ñāṇārāma Thero, in his particular monastic code of conduct, so he advised the monks who are in the Yogashrama Sanstha to avoid any kind of judicial involvement as per se. So therefore, going into politics is completely out of scope when Ñāṇārāma Thero is concerned. So he don't expect the monastics to get into politics or any because even judicial system is something that he don't want to get involved. Then you can understand, okay, he is not at all encouraging any kind of political involvement. But unfortunately, things have changed to the other sects, and monks were in the parliament, but in the present parliament, there are no monks, as far as I know. So things are going in a proper way, it seems. And monks also have understood, okay, we have to spend some time what Buddha has mentioned, and we shouldn't deviate from the teaching of the Buddha. So they can actually play the role of an advisor to the politician if they are coming and asking some advice and they want to get the blessing of the monks. During that time, they can say, okay, what is really necessary and what is the direction that the government has to move. Like that, they can give a certain advice rather than they themselves become a politician. So that is my view, actually.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mate, we might have to wrap up in just a second, but I wanted just to ask one more question that we might end on, which was, do you have one story to share with us of a teacher, you don't have to name the teacher, but just a particularly inspiring act from a teacher or something you witnessed of humility or kindness, just some kind of story that you have of a monastic you look up to, displaying some really beautiful spiritual quality to leave us with, if anything pops into mind. Sometimes it's hard to come up with on the spot, but I'm curious if anything does pop up.
Yeah, actually with Bhante Dhammajiva, I had many interesting, different kinds of stories. So let me share one, because Bhante Dhammaji is a really interesting character. He has a very good way of handling things, and he instructs the monks in a sometimes direct way, sometimes even harsh way, sometimes in a more fun way. So I'll share an interesting incident. So at one time I was conducting a retreat, and we were spending more time at the forest, and then go to the city to conduct a retreat, because I conduct retreats at Kalalgoda Vipassana Meditation Center in Colombo. So when I went there, so one girl was reading the questions, that reports. She was reading that. She's really beautiful. And you can imagine a monk spending most of the time at the forest and then go and participate in a retreat, and now you have to look at a girl. Look at a girl, and it has happened about during my 10th was or something like that. So I am also not that matured at that time. So this was the beginning of my my career as a teacher, and she was using very certain accent in English, because sometimes when you are using a different accent, very difficult to understand it. You have to very sharply look at her in order to understand what she is talking. in one sense, I have to safeguard myself, okay, not to distract myself, not to allow the mind to go with some wrong thoughts, wrong lustful thoughts, or any kind of attachments, or any distractions. I have to maintain a very quiet, very natural way of getting the question from her, and that was a really challenge. And on the way back, I told that to Bhante Dhammajiva. Bhante, this has happened. So you see that I came all the way from the monastery and I have to spend whole 1 hour look at this girl during the Q&A session. She is the one talking that question. So see what has happened. And then Bhante Dhammajiva said, she is the one given you the Kammatthana. She is the one given you the meditation instruction today. So you because sometimes we think, okay, Anapanasati is the Kammatthana, so the walking meditation is the Kammatthana, but these kind of real life situations sometimes give you really interesting Kammatthana. Okay, can you really maintain the monastic rules? Can you really maintain the mindfulness? Or without any distraction? So it's a really interesting point that he highlighted, and really I respect how he handled that my situation.
I love
It's
that.
something I like to share with you.
Thinking about the challenges we encounter as Kammatthana, that's a good one. I really like that, Bhante. Well, Bhante, thank you so much for joining us. We'll jump over to Zoom, and I'm going to post the link into the chat for anyone who wishes to join us there. Bhante should be with us, and we really wish you all the best. It was an honor that you joined us. We're glad to be able to have celebrated your teacher as well, and we hope you come and visit us in Seattle in not too long.
Very good. Yeah, I heard that from you, and nice to see you, and we'll meet you again at another time.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye. Tevan Sannai.